Let me ask you a question. Have you had a chance to try any of the stuff we've been talking about on communication yet? Have you tried to hook somebody's undivided attention with a strong statement, a specific question, or a personal reference? Have you done any salting before you make an important point? If you haven't started trying these yet, start trying them. And you're going to think, oh, but I'm afraid, or I'm not that good at it. Well, guess how you get good at it? You get good with practicing. I wasn't good at it when I first heard this from Gary Smalley, but literally within a few months, I became a pro at it. And it changed my whole life. I mean, I could have never had the business I had if I hadn't learned these techniques. So start testing them. You can test them on your friends, your spouse, your kids, but they work. And the more you use them, the more skilled you'll become at using them. But now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the single most important and powerful communication skill set or method ever devised. And we could look clear back into history. We could see Jesus. He used emotional word pictures all the time. Sometimes they were long parables, and other times they were real short. For example, he said to his disciples, who were fishermen. Okay, what do fishermen think about? They think about casting their nets. They think about bringing in the fish. And in one simple word picture, he said, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Instead of catching fish, you're going to bring men to me, and we're going to change their lives. You're going to be fishers of men. Great word picture, that simple. Emotional word pictures have been effectively used by people like Ronald Reagan. He was great at it. And even his commercials were great at creating pictures. He was called the great communicator, and part of it was because he knew how to use emotional word pictures. So what is an emotional word picture? An emotional word picture is a word picture that will stir up the emotions, reach the emotional level of a person's brain and heart in picture form. And I'll give you some examples in a minute, and then we'll look at how to create those word pictures so they'll be effective. One of my two best friends in life is a guy named Jim Shaughnessy. And Jim Shaughnessy was an All-American football player. He went to college on a football scholarship, full scholarship, was a running back. And but when he was offered 35 different scholarships to the top football schools in America, and he went to the one that his coach sent him to, and he got there, and he was a running back, and the first string running back, both his freshman and sophomore year, were All-Americans, already college All-Americans. And so he got almost no playing time, and it bothered him. It broke his heart. In fact, he ended up swearing at his coach over at one time, and I won't get into that, but it really wiped him out because he didn't come to college, honestly, to learn. He came to play football, and college to him was a stepping stone into pro football. And he was an amazing football player. But he got there, sat on the bench most of the first year, sat on the bench most of the second year, and it broke his heart. Well, Jim had fallen in love with another dear, dear friend of mine. This goes back many years ago. And they went together for 5 years. And she kept waiting for him to pop the question, get engaged and get married. And she waited and she waited. But Jim, in our company, he was in charge of international manufacturing. So he was all over the world, never had time. And he just kept putting it off, putting it off, putting it off. And finally, after 5 years of this, his sweet wife calls me and she said, I'm done. She says, I love Jim more than anything else in life. I love him. I want to be his wife. I want to have his kids. But Steve, he just won't commit. He won't ask the question. And I said, well, why don't we create a great emotional word picture? So she and I worked on this word picture that she could use with Jim. And about a week later, he came back into town. They were sitting down outside, and she used this emotional word picture. And the result was that night, they went looking for engagement rings. And within 90 days, they were married, okay? 5 years, 90 days. That's the power of a great emotional word picture. For the first time in Jim's life, he could actually feel what Patty was going through. And when he felt it, he could not act fast enough to help her out through those feelings. Here's the word picture she used. She said, Jim, tell me again how you used to feel when Frank wouldn't play you. And he went into one circumstance where he said, I knew I could have made that run. I could have gotten out there. I could have scored a touchdown. We could have won the game. And he just kept me on the bench. And he was very upset. And she said, well, was that the only time you did that? Oh my gosh, no. And then there was this time at this game. And there was this time at this game. And Jim starts going through that. And she sees the frustration and the hurt. And she said he actually, and Jim is the type that doesn't cry. I mean, my gosh, he was the most feared fighter at Arizona State University. But tears started flowing as he talked. And he talked for about an hour and a half to 2 hours about how horrible he felt going through this season after season. And then she looked at him and she said, Jim, you've been doing to me what your coach did to you. I've been sitting on the bench for 5 years. I've been wanting to be your wife. I love you so much, and I want to pour my life out and my love out on you, and I want to have your children, but keep me on the bench. You just won't bring me in. Well, you can see what it's doing to me. You can imagine what it did to Jim. And that night they went looking for engagement rings. And we had the joy of attending their wedding. I think it was maybe 60 days away at the most. It might have been 90 days, but it wasn't long. It happened. And they've been happily and wonderfully married ever since. And that was decades ago. That was 30 years ago. So all that to say, that's the power of a good emotional word picture. Now, how can you design emotional word pictures? We have a couple of PDFs that you're going to be able to pull down that can help you through that. But in using emotional word pictures, number one, you want to draw from the other person's experience when possible. So if she had given me a word picture like that, Steve, have you ever not been able to play sports when you wanted to? Yeah, in Little League Baseball. I was like a strikeout guy, so I didn't get put in at first. Have a little bit of impact on me, but not much. But with Jim, football was his whole life, from 6th grade all the way until he tried out for the pros. And so that was a great word picture. Another person that I know, she wanted a bigger house. And her husband had told her when they first got married, I'm going to be rich someday. And what I hate about rich people is they change their cars, they change their houses, they change their friends. We're not going to change. And you just need to know that. And the wife said, that's okay. I love you. We don't have to change. And he said, okay. Well, a few years later, they had some children and he was worth $10 million. And still in a small house, she goes to him and he says, I told you, we're not going to change these things. A few years later, he's worth $50 million and they're still in this tiny house and they have more kids and she's going nuts. But he puts his hand up. I told you, we're not going to do this. A few years later, he's worth over $100 million and they're still living in this stinky little house. Well, she goes to a Gary Smalley seminar and he shows how to do word pictures. And then during the break, he has everybody break off and try coming up with emotional word pictures that they can share with their mate. And so Gary sees this couple, their name are Jack and Sherry, and they're in the back of the room. And all of a sudden he sees Jack do that. And Gary thinks, what's happening? And then he pulls a checkbook out of his back pocket and writes a check, rips it off, and hands it to Sherry. And Gary thinks, I got to see what happened. So he goes up to him and he says, what's going on? And Jack says, you know, she used an emotional word picture, Gary. And for the first time, I really feel how she's feeling. And man, I can't get her into a bigger house fast enough. So I wrote her a check for $160,000 as a down payment. And I told her, if that's not enough, you name the price and I'll write a bigger check. And of course, she's crying and he's teary-eyed. That's the power of a good emotional word picture. The word picture she used with him related to fishing because he was an avid fisherman. I can't stand fishing. Its boredom is second only to golf for me. And so it would have done nothing for me, but she pulled that because Jack loved to fish. He was a catch and release guy. So he loved to look at the fish and throw them back in, and he cared about fish, okay? And so that's what she used. So it's important when you're creating a emotional word picture, especially if you want to communicate something that's really important to you. The deeper you can go into what the other person values. So you can pick things from nature, you can pick things from their past, shared experiences, but you find something that's going to relate to them. Another guy that I met one time, he had fought in the Korean War, and he had been in the trenches. And his boss, he was on a night shift, and his boss promised him, next time an opening comes on the day shift, I'm going to put you in that so you won't have to work at nights, and I'll give you a promotion at the same time. Well, an opening came, and he got passed over. And then another opening came, and he got passed over again. He went to his boss, and his boss had fought in World War II. And he said, weren't you in the trenches? Oh, yeah. With other guys, right? Yeah, I was in the foxholes with other guys. And he said, and you're concerned about the enemy, right? Oh, yeah, man, they're coming. We're shooting them. Imagine if you were in that foxhole with the guy and he took his rifle. Instead of aiming at the enemy, he aims down at your foot and shoots your foot. And you go, whoa, what the heck? And he says, oh, I'm sorry. And he shoots a couple more at the enemy, and then he shoots you in the leg. And you go, what the heck are you doing to me? And the guy goes, yeah, that'd be crazy. And he said, well, you know what? I've been in the foxhole with you for a year now. And you shot me in the foot. You shot me in the leg. And I can't believe, because I thought we were friends. And I really trusted you when you said you were going to put me on the day shift and give me a promotion. Guess what? Within 1 week, he was on the day shift and had a promotion. You see, he wasn't telling the boss he's a jerk or a liar. He was sharing how he felt and using an emotional word picture to convey that. Now, we're going to give you some PDFs that take you through some questions and will really help you to build emotional word pictures. There's a couple things that you need to know, though. You need to practice the word picture so that when you do use it, you'll use it well. You can practice in the mirror. You can practice with a friend. You can just practice saying it, going through it 3, 4, 5 times before you're actually going to do it. Then you need to pick a time. Remember how we said timing is a barrier to effective communication? You can't pick a time where your spouse is in 10 minutes has something they've got to go do. They've got to go bake some cookies, or they've got a golf date that they can't wait to get to. That's the wrong time. You've got to pick a time when there's no distractions and ask for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Same thing if your emotional word picture is to a peer or a boss or whatever. You've got to pick a time where they're not thinking, God, why am I doing this right now? So you've got to pick a good time to do it. So there's different things like that we share with you in those PDFs, so be sure and look at them. In our next session, we're going to talk about one last communication method. And this one is really good when it comes to trying to get understanding and really make sure that the person clearly understands what you're saying and what you're feeling. So we'll do that in our next session.